I, 28F, have been with my fiancé Alex, 30M, for 6 years now. We met during our senior year of college when we were paired up for a group project in our environmental science class. I remember being struck by his passion for conservation and his kind eyes. We quickly became friends, bonding over our shared love of nature and terrible sci-fi movies. Our relationship grew slowly but steadily. Alex was always patient and understanding, never pushing me to move faster than I was comfortable with. He knew I had some trust issues from past relationships and gave me the time and space I needed to open up. About a year into our relationship, Alex was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It was a scary and uncertain time for both of us. I still remember sitting in the doctor's office, holding his hand as we listened to the explanation of what this chronic condition would mean for his life. Alex was understandably upset and worried about how this would impact our future together. But for me, it only strengthened my feelings for him. Seeing how bravely he faced this diagnosis and how determined he was to not let it define him made me admire him even more. I threw myself into researching the condition, learning everything I could about how to support him. There have been tough times, of course. Alex has had a few severe flare-ups that resulted in hospital stays. But we've faced each challenge together, and it's only brought us closer. Last year, on a hike to our favorite waterfall, Alex insisted on going, even though he wasn't feeling great that day. He got down on one knee and proposed. It was the easiest yes of my life. Now, some backstory on my family situation. My dad passed away when I was 12 from pancreatic cancer. It was a relatively short battle, only about 8 months from diagnosis to the end. Those months were a blur of hospital visits, hushed conversations between my parents that would stop when I entered the room, and a growing sense of dread that I couldn't quite understand at that age. My dad was my hero. He was a high school history teacher, beloved by his students for his terrible dad jokes and genuine passion for the subject. At home, he was always up for an impromptu dance party in the kitchen or a late-night ice cream run. Losing him left a gaping hole in my life. My mom, Martha, 52F, was understandably devastated by Dad's death. For months, she was barely functional. I remember having to remind her to eat, practically begging her to take a shower. Eventually, she threw herself into her work as a real estate agent, often leaving before I woke up and coming home long after I'd gone to bed. For years, it was just the two of us rattling around in our too-big house. We grew close out of necessity, bonding over our shared grief. But there was always a part of my mom that seemed absent, like she'd buried a piece of herself along with my dad. When I was in high school, my mom started seeing a therapist. Slowly, I saw glimpses of her old self returning. She started cooking again. Dad had always been the chef in our family, took up gardening, and even started dating a bit. Nothing serious, just a few coffee dates here and there. I went off to college, feeling hopeful that my mom was finally healing. We talked often, and she seemed happier than she'd been in years. That's why I was so excited when, during my sophomore year, she called to tell me she'd met someone special. Jim, 55M, seemed great at first. He was a successful businessman, charming and confident. He made my mom laugh in a way I hadn't heard since before Dad died. I was thrilled for her. But over time, I started noticing things. The way Jim would make subtle digs at my choice to major in environmental science instead of something practical like business. How he'd comment on my appearance, saying things like, "You'd be so pretty if you just put in a little effort." My mom always brushed it off, saying he was just teasing or that I was being too sensitive. When I introduced Alex to them, I could immediately sense my mom's disapproval. She was polite enough, but there was a coolness to her interactions with him. Jim was openly dismissive, barely acknowledging Alex's attempts at conversation. Over the years, my mom's attitude towards Alex has only gotten worse. She's made comments about how his health issues will hold me back in life. Once, when Alex had to cancel plans with them due to a flare-up, she suggested that maybe I should find someone more reliable. I've always defended Alex, but I'll admit there were times I didn't push back as hard as I should have. I was so afraid of damaging my relationship with my mom, of losing the only parent I had left. But looking back, I realize I was letting her mistreat the person I love most in the world. That brings us to last week. My mom called, bubbling with excitement. She and Jim had gotten engaged and were planning a fall wedding. I congratulated her, pushing down my mixed feelings about Jim. Then she dropped the bombshell. She didn't want Alex to attend the wedding because his health issues might cause a scene, and she wanted the day to be perfect. I was stunned into silence for a moment. When I found my voice, I told her in no uncertain terms that this was completely unacceptable. Alex's condition is well managed, and he'd never do anything to draw attention to himself at someone else's event. Plus, he's going to be her son-in-law. How could she even think of excluding him? My mom got defensive, saying she was just being practical. She went on about how hard she'd worked to plan this wedding and how she deserved to have everything be perfect. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that if Alex wasn't welcome, then I wouldn't be attending either. This led to a huge argument. My mom accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. She went on a long rant about how much she'd sacrificed as a single mother, how she'd put her life on hold for me, and how I owed it to her to be there on her special day. I countered that the only one being selfish was her for excluding my fiancé over something he can't control. The call ended with her in tears and me shaking with anger. Since then, she's been alternating between guilt-tripping texts, "I guess I was a terrible mother if this is how you treat me," and angry voicemails demanding I apologize. Some family members have reached out saying I should just give in to keep the peace. My Aunt Linda suggested I go to the wedding solo and then have a separate celebration with Alex after. But the thought of attending an event that explicitly excludes the man I love makes me feel sick. I know my mom has been through a lot. Losing Dad was devastating for both of us, and I'm genuinely glad she's found happiness again, even if I have my reservations about Jim. But I can't condone her treatment of Alex. This isn't just about one wedding. It's about her overall attitude towards him and her refusal to accept him as part of my life long term. Am I being unreasonable here? Should I suck it up and go to the wedding solo to make her happy? Or stand my ground? I'm really torn and could use some outside perspective. AETA for refusing to attend my mom's wedding unless my fiancé is invited too? Update 1. Thank you all for the supportive comments and messages. Reading through everything really helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. A few days after my initial post, I was at home working on some reports for my job at the local wildlife sanctuary when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to find my mom standing there when I opened it. For a split second, I thought maybe she'd come to apologize. But as soon as I saw her face, I knew that wasn't the case. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying, but there was a hardness to her expression that I recognized from our worst arguments. I hesitated, but ultimately decided to let her in. As soon as the door closed behind her, she launched into a tearful monologue about how hurt she was that I would abandon her on her wedding day. She talked about how she'd always imagined having her only daughter by her side as she walked down the aisle, how she'd dreamed of this day for years. I stood there, arms crossed, as she went on and on. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Seeing my mom cry has always been hard for me. But a bigger part was angry that she was trying to manipulate me like this. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke up. I told her that I wanted to be there for her wedding, but not at the expense of excluding Alex. I reminded her that he's going to be her son-in-law, and that deliberately uninviting him was hurtful not just to him, but to me as well. That's when things took a turn. My mom's tearful expression hardened, and she started in on how she was just trying to protect me. She said things like, "What if he has an episode during the ceremony? You'll be so embarrassed. And I just don't want you to be burdened with taking care of him when you should be celebrating with me." I was livid. I told her in no uncertain terms that Alex is not a burden. He's my partner. I said the only thing that would embarrass me is having a mother who discriminates against people with health issues. She got angry then, saying I was choosing Alex over her. I pointed out that she was the one forcing me to choose in the first place by uninviting him. Then she played her trump card. She threatened to cut me out of her will if I didn't attend the wedding solo. I was stunned. In all our arguments over the years, she'd never stooped this low. For a moment, I flashed back to my childhood, to all the times she'd used money or gifts to try to buy my affection or compliance after a fight. I took a deep breath and told her she could keep her money. I wasn't for sale. The look on her face, I don't think I'll ever forget it. A mix of shock, anger, and something else. Almost like she was seeing me for the first time. Without another word, she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. I sank onto the couch, feeling drained. I must have sat there for hours, replaying the conversation in my head. I kept thinking about my dad, wondering what he would say if he could see us now. He always hated conflict, preferring to smooth things over with a bad joke or an impromptu family game night. Later that evening, I got an email from Jim. The subject line was, "Let's work this out," which already had me rolling my eyes. He wrote that he understood both sides and wanted to suggest a compromise. Alex could attend the ceremony but leave before the reception so he wouldn't get overtired. I was fuming as I read his patronizing words. I fired back a response saying that excluding Alex from half the event was still unacceptable discrimination. I also pointed out that if they were really concerned about Alex's comfort, they'd let him decide for himself what he could handle. Jim's reply came quickly. He said I was being difficult and should be more understanding of my mom's desire for a perfect day. He went on about how much stress my mom was under with the wedding planning and how my stubbornness was making things worse. I blocked his email after that. The next day, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Karen, my mom's younger sister. I almost didn't answer, but I've always been close with Karen. She was more like a big sister to me growing up, always there with advice about boys or help with my math homework. Karen started off by saying she'd heard about the fight with my mom. She said she thought I was being too harsh and should cut my mom some slack given everything she went through as a widow. She reminded me of how hard those first few years after Dad died were, how my mom had to learn to be both parents to me. I listened quietly, tears pricking at my eyes as I remembered those dark days. But then Karen said something that snapped me back to the present. Sometimes we have to sacrifice a little for family. Your mom deserves to have the wedding she wants. I took a deep breath and told Karen that while I appreciated her perspective, she was missing the point. This wasn't about one wedding. It was about my mom's overall treatment of Alex and her refusal to accept him as part of my life long term. I said that by excluding Alex, my mom was the one refusing to accept our whole family. Karen sighed and said, "You're so stubborn, just like your father." She meant it as a criticism, I think, but I took it as a compliment. My dad never stood for unfair treatment of anyone. I remember him getting into heated arguments with relatives who made racist comments at family gatherings, refusing to back down even when it would have been easier to stay quiet. After I hung up with Karen, I called Alex at work. Hearing his voice instantly made me feel calmer. I filled him in on everything that had happened. He listened patiently, then told me how proud he was of me for standing my ground. He even offered to skip the wedding himself to keep the peace, but I refused. This is about so much more than just one event. This whole situation has been incredibly draining, but it's also clarifying in a way. I'm seeing my mom and certain family members in a new light. And I'm more certain than ever that Alex is the one I want to build my life with. I'm sticking to my decision not to attend unless Alex is fully included and welcomed. My mom made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences. I won't compromise my values or my relationship just to make her happy. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and unfortunately, things have only gotten worse. My mom has apparently been on a smear campaign, telling anyone who will listen that I'm abandoning her and ruining her wedding by refusing to attend without Alex. She's painting herself as the victim and me as the ungrateful daughter. Last week, I ran into my cousin Melissa at the farmer's market. Melissa and I grew up together. Our moms are sisters and we're only a few months apart in age. We were inseparable as kids, sharing everything from clothes to our first sips of stolen wine at family gatherings. As soon as Melissa saw me, her eyes widened and she made a beeline for my stall. I sell homemade jams and preserves from fruit I grow in my garden, a hobby I picked up from my dad. I thought she was excited to see me, but as soon as she opened her mouth, I realized this wasn't a friendly visit. Melissa immediately started in on how I need to forgive my mom and stop being so selfish. I was shocked. Melissa and I have always been close, and I thought she'd understand my position. But it turns out my mom got to her first with her twisted version of events. I tried to explain my side, reminding Melissa of all the times my mom had made snide comments about Alex's health over the years. But Melissa wasn't having it. She said, "Your mom has been alone for so long, can't you just give her this one day?" I replied that if it was really about being there for my mom, Alex would be invited too since he's going to be her son-in-law. Melissa rolled her eyes and said, "Come on, we both know he's not going to be around long-term. Why risk ruining the wedding photos?" I was absolutely livid. I told Melissa she had no right to make assumptions about my relationship, and that her attitude was grossly ableist. She got huffy and said I was overreacting. I ended up packing up my stall early and leaving to avoid saying something I'd regret. That night, as I was stress baking, another habit I picked up from my dad, I got a group text from some extended family members I'm not even that close to. My great-aunt Mildred, who I haven't seen since I was a teenager. My mom's cousin Robert, who I'm not sure I'd even recognize if I passed him on the street. They were all piling on about how I need to do the right thing and attend the wedding solo. One message in particular stood out. It was from my Uncle Pete, my dad's younger brother. Pete and I were close when I was little. He was the fun uncle who always brought me cool science kits for Christmas and taught me how to skip stones, but we drifted apart after Dad died. Pete's message read, "Your father would be so disappointed in you." Those words felt like a physical blow. I found myself wondering, would my dad really be disappointed in me for standing up for my fiancé? For refusing to attend an event that discriminated against him? I thought back to my childhood, to all the lessons my dad had taught me about standing up for what's right. I remembered him refusing to do business with a company that wouldn't hire women for management positions, even though it cost him a big contract. I thought about how he always went out of his way to make people feel included, especially those who were often overlooked or marginalized. That was the last straw. I sent a reply to the whole group laying out exactly why I wasn't attending and how hurtful and discriminatory my mom's actions have been. I explained that my dad taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I finished by saying anyone who supports excluding Alex is no longer welcome in my life. The fallout has been intense. I've gotten everything from angry messages to tearful voicemails. My phone has been buzzing nonstop with notifications. But I've also had a few family members reach out privately to say they support me and admire me for taking a stand. My cousin Jake, who has type 1 diabetes, sent a particularly touching message about how much it means to him to see someone standing up against discrimination based on health issues. Through it all, Alex has been my rock. He's listened to me rant and cry, held me when I needed comfort, and given me space when I needed to process on my own. Seeing how cruel and judgmental my family can be has only made me more certain that he's the one I want to build a life with. We've started talking about maybe eloping instead of having a big wedding ourselves. The thought of dealing with more family drama on what's supposed to be a happy day just feels exhausting. Plus, the idea of a small, intimate ceremony focused on our love rather than pleasing others is starting to sound really appealing. I'm standing firm in my decision. My mom and anyone who supports her actions can kick rocks. I'm done compromising my values to make other people comfortable. Update 3. Well, the wedding happened last weekend. As expected, I didn't attend. But there have been some unexpected developments I wanted to share. The night before the wedding, I got a call from my mom's best friend, Linda. She's known me since I was a kid and has always been like an aunt to me. Linda was there through my awkward middle school years, my first heartbreak in high school, and was a huge support when my dad passed away. Linda said she wanted to give me a heads up about something that happened at the rehearsal dinner. Apparently, my mom had been drinking heavily and started bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. She was saying awful things about how I'm dead to her, and she wasted her life raising such an ungrateful brat. I was hurt, but not really surprised. What did shock me was what Linda said next. Apparently, Jim, my mom's new husband, stood up and told my mom she needed to stop. He said she was embarrassing herself and that she should be ashamed for how she's treated me and Alex. According to Linda, it turned into a big scene with my mom screaming at Jim and storming out. I didn't know how to feel about this information. On one hand, I was glad someone finally stood up to my mom. On the other, it was hard to hear how far she'd fallen. I thanked Linda for letting me know and tried to put it out of my mind. The next morning, the day of the wedding, I woke up to a text from Jim of all people. He apologized for his role in everything and said he realized how wrong it was to exclude Alex. He admitted he'd just been going along with what my mom wanted to keep her happy, but seeing how cruel she was being made him realize he'd made a huge mistake. Jim said he understood if I couldn't forgive him, but he wanted me to know he was sorry. He also mentioned that he'd insisted Alex be invited to the wedding, even if it was last minute. He said the invitation was still open if we wanted to come. I showed the message to Alex, not sure how to respond. Part of me was tempted to go, to see if this could be a turning point in our relationship with my mom. But a bigger part felt like it was too little, too late. Alex said he'd support whatever decision I made, but gently reminded me of all the pain my mom had caused over the years. In the end, I decided not to go. I texted Jim back thanking him for the apology and the invitation, but saying I didn't think it would be a good idea to attend. I said I needed time before I could consider any kind of relationship with him or my mom. Alex and I spent the day of the wedding having a picnic at the lake where we first said I love you. It was a beautiful, peaceful day, a stark contrast to what I imagined was happening at the wedding. I heard through the grapevine that the wedding was a tense affair. Several family members chose not to attend in solidarity with me, which I was touched by. And my mom was reportedly in a foul mood the whole time, snapping at people and complaining about how imperfect everything was. It's been a few days now, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. I haven't heard directly from my mom since the wedding. Part of me is hurt by her silence, but another part is relieved. I'm not sure I'm ready to face her yet. I'm trying to focus on the positives. My relationship with Alex is stronger than ever. Some of my family members have shown their true colors, both good and bad. And I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, capable of standing up for what's right, even when it's incredibly difficult. I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with my mom, Part of me hopes that maybe this will be a wake-up call for her to examine her behavior. But I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focused on moving forward with the people who truly love and support me. Alex first and foremost.